welcome to World at Noon. I am Obi Chukwemeka Uti. Every 1st of December, the world commemorates World AIDS Day. People around the world unite to share support for people living and affected by HIV and to remember those who lost their lives to AIDS. This World AIDS Day is more than a celebration of the achievements of communities. It is a call to action to enable and support communities in their leadership roles. The United Nations says that the world can end AIDS as a public threat by 2030, but only if communities are fully included and are sufficiently funded to lead the way. The Ondo State Executive Council has approved the 35,000 Naira wage award for workers in the state. This is part of the decisions reached at the end of the State Executive Council meeting, presided over by the Deputy Governor, Mr. Lucky Ayedatiwa. The meeting held at the ESCO chamber of the Governor's office in Akure was well attended. Government House correspondent Wahab Bankole has details.
About noon, members of the Ondo State Executive Council arrived at the Governor's office for the State Executive Council meeting. The arrival of the Deputy Governor, Lucky Ayedatiwa, at the ESCO chambers of the Governor's office signaled the official commencement of the meeting. The business of the day commenced immediately after the opening formalities. Briefing journalists at the end of the meeting, the State Commissioner for Information and Orientation, Bamidele Ademola Olateju, said Ondo State became the first state to approve the payment of 35,000 Naira wage award with effect from November.
Agreement has been reached with Labour to pay the wage palliative 35,000 to workers in the state. And that will be paid from this month.
The Information Commissioner also added that the Council was briefed on the outcome of the peace meeting held with President Bola Tinubu in Abuja.
We discussed as one family, and the key decisions were spelled out for those who were not there. And these are the key decisions that was reached in Abuja that we discussed among ourselves. 1, that there must be peace, and all parties must embrace peace. 2, that status quo should remain in the state, that the governor is still governor and the deputy governor is deputy governor, that there should be no dissolution of the State Executive Council, that the party structure should not be touched in the state, and that the leadership of the State House of Assembly should remain intact, and that the President requested for a letter of resignation from the Deputy Governor signed but undated. We all agree to embrace peace.
On the alleged forging of the signature of Governor Oluwarotimi Akeredolu to lose the state resources, the Commissioner debunked the news. Wahab Bankole, Osrc News.
From the executive to the legislative arm of government, the Ondo State House of Assembly has withdrawn its appeal filed before the Court of Appeal Abuja against the ruling of the Federal High Court Abuja, which stopped the planned impeachment of the Ondo State Deputy Governor, Mr. Lucky Ayedatiwa. The ODHA and its Speaker had challenged the jurisdiction of the Federal High Court Abuja to handle the matter and appealed against the court's ruling halting the planned impeachment of the Deputy Governor. At yesterday's proceedings, counsel for the Speaker and the Assembly, Remi Olatobora, told the 3-member panel of justices of the Appellate Court that his clients had decided to withdraw the case. Olatobora said the parties in the matter have found a political solution to their problems and have signed an agreement to withdraw the appeal in the interest of peace and as part of the agreement reached by the parties. Respondents in the appeal confirmed that they were served with the notice of withdrawal, adding that they were not objecting to the notice of withdrawal. Justice Haruna Samani, who led the three-member panel, subsequently dismissed the appeal, having been withdrawn by the appellants. A Nigerian Air Force helicopter has crash-landed and exploded at the North Base, Port Harcourt. The helicopter crashed at exactly 7:40 p.m. shortly after it took off for an operation against economic saboteurs in Rivers State. Now spokesman Edward Cabwet confirmed the development in a statement saying those on board survived, though they sustained minor injuries. Following Wednesday's presentation of the 2024 budget to a joint session of the National Assembly by President Bola Tinubu, senators have begun debates on general principles of the 27.5 trillion naira proposal. On the floor of the upper legislative chamber, Senator Benos Yoro from Adamawa State, who said Tinubu was not fair to the National Assembly, lamented that the president brought the budget to the Assembly late and yet expects lawmakers to do a thorough job within a few weeks. On his part, Senate leader Bamidele Okoyemi described the 9.9 trillion naira recurrent expenditure as very high, as it constitutes 43% of the budget. President Tinubu had explained that based on parameters and fiscal assumptions, recurrent expenditure will go up 9.92 trillion naira, capital expenditure 8.7 trillion naira, deficit 9.18 trillion naira, and debt servicing 8.25 trillion naira. The 2024 proposal is 26% higher than the 2023 budget presented by former President Muhammadu Buhari in 2022. Pan-Yoruba socio-political organization Afenifere has called on the federal government to quicken steps on tackling insecurity threatening socio-economic well-being of the people. The group also called on government to start the process of decentralizing the police to facilitate the curtailment of breaches in internal security. The calls are part of the resolutions at the Afenifere caucus meeting held at the Akura residence of the leader, Ruben Fashoranti. Afenifere asked the federal government to meet the December deadline given for Port Harcourt refinery to resume production and to accelerate actions that will strengthen the value of the currency, enhance productivity, and reduce costs of items. The organization also called for acceleration of actions in the power sector by the Minister of Power and Energy, Adebayo Adelabu, in view of the pivotal roles that power plays in the economic and social lives of the people. Let's now take you to Lagos State, where the government says the second phase of the Blue Line Rail project from Mile 2 to Okoko, which construction has started, will be completed in 2027. According to the Managing Director of the Lagos Metropolitan Area Transport Authority, Lamata, Abimbola Akinajo, despite the hiccups encountered with the first phase of the project, which is from Marina to Mile 2, it has been success stories since it commenced commercial operations on September 4. Mrs. Akinajo stated that since the commercial operations commenced, there had not been delay in service, even when the service switched to electric mode of powering the train and doing 52 trips daily. She said the state government and the agency are on course in terms of deploying electric buses for commercial operations, disclosing that the challenges encountered in deploying additional buses have been addressed. Greed, lawlessness, and selfishness of nation leaders contributed immensely to the high rate of corruption in any country. Dr. Alaba Akini of the Department of Business Administration and Management at the Rufus Giwa Polytechnic Owo was delivering inaugural lecture at the institution. Omorela Ugunji reports that the title of the lecture, Servant Leadership, a potent approach to fight corruption in Nigeria, suggested numbers of solutions to address the menace. The reports.
This is the 6th inaugural lecture to be delivered at the Rufus Giwa Polytechnic, Owo local government area of Ondo State, since its establishment. Dr. Alaba Kiniyi, in his 96-page book with 10 headings from introduction to conclusion, pointed out why good leadership must put the interests of his followers at heart to actualize his intending visions in improving their lives. He attributed causes of corruption in the country to bad leadership, poverty, insecurity, weak judicial system, faulty trading beliefs, lack of media freedom to expose corrupt practices, among others, while sex for marks and money politics has bastardized the educational system. The scholars suggested that servant leadership be incorporated into the curricula of all tiers of education system from elementary level, while people with high integrity and impeccable character are recommended to head anti-corruption agencies for effective delivery.
Today. Number 3, there is a need for Nigerian leaders to be by example. To this end, we will play down the habits of effectiveness and covetousness, and we have to be more effective. We have bidding and reward and award of public processes should be more transparent, especially in the public sector. Pluralism and tribalism should achieve appointment of people to lead their corruption agencies to remain on merit.
In his keynote address, acting rector of the institution, Mr. Olorunwa Adegun commended the lecturer for good delivery, adding that the topic pointedly addressed one of the major issues which reflects the systemic failure in the country. A copy of the lecture note was presented to the acting rector as he declared the inaugural lecturer, Dr. Alaba Kiniyi, the chief lecturer. Others at the event lauded the aptness of the topic to the current crisis facing the country.
Very outstanding and very distinct. In fact, I confirm now that it was very scholarly, even during our secondary school days. It was always coming first. He demonstrated it today from the quality of the lecture.
It has really indicated that he is a man of excellence and an academic to the core.
In 1989, Dr. Alaba Kiniyi got employment into the then Ondo State Polytechnic, Owo, now Rufus Giwa Polytechnic, and has produced 16 books to his credit. He is currently the chief lecturer and chairman of the Research and Technical Journal Committee of the institution. Omoriola Hungbeji, Osrc News.
In another development, Nigerian Institute of Quantity Surveyors, NIQS, has called on the authorities to put in place clear regulatory framework to promote transparency and accountability in the construction industry. Chairman NIQS Lagos State Chapter Olarewaju Farotimi made the call in Lagos, expressing worries over increasing irregularities in the sector. He noted that a clear regulatory framework will not only promote transparency and accountability, but will address the issue of corruption in the construction industry. He said the lack of technical expertise among construction professionals would have a significant impact on sustainable construction management. Farotimi had unnecessary knowledge and skills without which construction managers may be unable to properly evaluate costs and benefits of different options, leading to sub-optional decisions and increased costs. President Bola Tinubu has confirmed the appointment of Wuraola Adepoju as the Substantive Controller General of Nigerian Immigration Service. The Ile-Oluji-born immigration officer made the disclosure while addressing men and officers of the service at a routine parade, adding that her decoration will soon be made public. The Controller General further announced that some members of the top management team who took part in a promotion examination recently have been elevated to the ranks of Deputy Controller General. On the expiration of the tenure of the former Controller General, Issa Jere, on May 29, 2023, Mrs. Adepoju, as the most senior Deputy Controller General, was appointed in acting capacity to lead the Immigration Service. Nigeria has successfully completed the final global assessment of Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative (EITI), securing an overall score of 72 points out of 100. By former New Zealand Prime Minister Helen Clark, the International Board of EITI disclosed the results after an 11-month evaluation. The assessment highlighted Nigeria's excellence in 3 crucial areas: outcomes and impacts, implementing transparency-driven reforms, and stakeholders' engagement. The board specifically praised NEITI's effective implementation, recognizing visible and tangible impacts on extractive industry governance. Now, operatives of the Nigerian Police Force in Kaduna State have arrested a syndicate of 8 terrorists and who engaged in kidnapping and armed robbery. Command also said, based on the directive of the Commissioner of Police, Musa Garba, operatives have been ordered to comb nooks and crannies, including the den of bandits in the state, to make the Utah safe for citizens. The spokesperson of the command, Mansour Hassan, said operatives from the divisional headquarters, May Ghana, succeeded in the arrest based on intelligence gathering. He disclosed that their gang leader, Anazawa M. of Faring Castle Village, is at large, even as those arrested will have their day in court at the completion of the investigation. Heavy gunfire has been reported in Guinea-Bissau's capital hours after some National Guard soldiers went to free a detained minister and a senior state official. Members of the National Guard took the officials before seeking refuge south of the capital. Special forces then intervened after attempts to negotiate failed, resulting in an exchange of gunfire. Calm is said to have been restored later. The Finance Minister Suleiman Saidi and the Secretary of State for the Treasury, Antonio Montero, had been detained amid investigations into the alleged irregular withdrawal of $10 million. Now let's take you to Russia, where the Supreme Court has ruled that LGBTQ activists should be designated extremists in a move that representatives of gay and transgender people fear will lead to arrests and prosecutions. The court ruled that the international LGBTQ public movement and its subdivisions were extremist and issued a ban on its activities on the territory of Russia. Akintude Akinshimola has details.
Russia's top court has ruled that LGBTQ activists should be designated extremist representatives of gay and transgender people fear. The ruling will lead to the arrest and prosecution of those who speak out for the community. The Supreme Court announced the approval of a Justice Ministry request to recognize what they call the international LGBT social movement as extremist and to ban its activities. Activists like Alexei Sergeyev, who spoke, saw the decision as inevitable. He says the ruling will deprive many LGBTQ people of support.
Many activities are aimed at supporting the community. It is psychological assistance, it is legal assistance, protecting people. It is some kind of meetings where you can just sit and drink tea. This will all be so underground that I'm sure that unfortunately there are many people who will not be able to get help. They will either commit suicide or simply be in some terrible state. Their life will be shortened and their health will deteriorate. They will drink alcohol and smoke cigarettes more, and so on, somehow trying to escape from this reality.
The move is part of a pattern of increasingly restrictive measures in Russia on expression of sexual orientation and gender identity. They include laws banning the promotion of non-traditional sexual relations and bans on legal or medical changes of gender. President Vladimir Putin, with support from the Orthodox Church, has long sought to project Russia as a guardian of traditional morality. It's a contrast to the Western societies it portrays as decadent in their tolerance of gay parades and acceptance of dozens of gender. More than 100 groups are already banned in Russia as extremists. Previous listings, including the Jehovah's Witnesses religious movement and organizations linked to opposition politician Alexei Navalny, have served as a prelude to arrest. Akintunde Akinshomola for Osrc News.
OPEC plus oil producers have agreed to voluntary output cuts totaling about 2.2 million barrels per day for early next year, led by Saudi Arabia rolling over its current voluntary cut. Benchmark global oil prices settled down around 2%, in part because the reductions were voluntary and because of investor expectation ahead of the meeting that additional supply cuts might be deeper. Adirunke Kolawole has more.
The group of oil-producing nations known as OPEC Plus is cutting supply by nearly 2 million barrels a day beginning next year. The decision came during a virtual meeting to discuss 2024 output amid concerns the market faces a potential surplus. OPEC Plus, which is led by Saudi Arabia and includes member allies such as Russia, pumps more than 40% of the world's oil. The group's current output already reflects cuts of about 5 million barrels a day, aimed at supporting prices and stabilizing the market. Oil prices first rose on the news by more than 1%, but by Thursday afternoon at reserve cost, with the US crude dropping by nearly 2.5% to under $76 a barrel. One expert said there is a high degree of skepticism on how individual OPEC Plus members will reach their voluntary cuts, going so far as to call the plan culture. He added that the UAE, for example, is supposed to be increasing production by 200,000 barrels per day by 2024. OPEC Plus is focused on lower output with prices down from nearly $98 a barrel in late September and concerns bring over weaker economic growth in 2024. Adirunke Kolawole, Osrc News.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has clearly laid out benchmarks for the protection of civilians in Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza. The strongest and most specific U.S. remarks yet, Mr. Blinken said he had told the Israeli government it must avoid further mass displacement of Palestinians and damage to critical infrastructure like hospitals, power stations, and water facilities. He did not, however, appear to set down red lines that would trigger U.S. actions. The Secretary of State traveled to Israel to deliver the message. His fourth visit since the conflict began at a time when hostilities have been paused by a deal to release hostages captured by Hamas. Mr. Blinken accepted that Israel planned to resume its military operation, but he also underscored the imperative for the United States that the massive loss of civilian life and displacement of a scale that we saw in northern Gaza not be repeated. in the south. The death of contentious former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger has drawn nostalgia and compliments in China at a time when relations between the two countries have nosedived. Hours after news of the death broke, the related hashtag became the most searched trend in China with millions of views. Relations between Washington and Beijing have perhaps hit their lowest point since the two sides began talking officially in 1979, a combination of efforts kicked off by Mr. Kissinger. While ties were normalized under President Jimmy Carter, it was his predecessor, Richard Nixon, who made that first historic trip to Beijing to meet Mao Zedong in 1972, putting an end to decades of hostility. Mr. Kissinger, who shaped U.S. foreign policy during some of the most crucial Cold War years, was instrumental in brokering that trip, which many see as a pivotal moment in China's decision to engage with the West. In 1971, he paid a clandestine visit to Beijing to arrange the meeting. Now, talking sports, Nigeria at the MKO Abiola National Stadium, Abuja, have moved closer to the 2024 African Women's Cup of Nations with a 5-0 defeat of final qualifying opponents, Cape Verde. The Super Falcons showed that the absence of some of their superstars was nothing to worry about with the way they demolished Cape Verdeans. Uchenna Kanu and substitute Esther Okoronkwo scored a brace each. The 9-time African champions gave Nigerians reasons to smile. A free kick in the 4th minute by Gift Monday had opened the floodgate of goals. In the meantime, chairman of Aqua United Football Club, Paul Barsi, has been elected the second vice president of African Clubs Association, ACA, at the launch of the association in Cairo, Egypt. All Nigeria Premier Football League clubs, namely Aqua United, Plateau United, Pendle Insurance, and Kano Pillars, were invited by CAF to attend the association's inauguration in Egypt. Hassan Said of Young African Football Club of Tanzania emerged president, while the marketing director of Kaizer Chiefs Football Club of South Africa, Jessica Mutong, will serve as first vice president of the association. African Clubs Association is a body formed by the Confederation of African Football CAF to help improve the quality and competitiveness of African football. CAF President Patrice Motsepe and other top officials, as well as representatives from FIFA, attended the event. And that does it on World at Noon. Many thanks for your time. Good afternoon.